Robert Fratta was a former police officer in the Houston area. His name became widely known again in the final months of 2022. He was scheduled for execution by the state of Texas. The date was set for January 10, 2023. Fratta had been convicted decades earlier in a murder-for-hire plot. This was a crime that shocked the community. The victim of this calculated plan was his own wife. Her name was Farah Fratta. The murder occurred in 1994. It was the culmination of a bitter domestic dispute. Ultimately, Robert Fratta was executed by lethal injection. This brought a definitive end to a long legal saga. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Robert and Farah Fratta were married in 1983. They had 3 children together during their marriage. However, their relationship deteriorated significantly. Farah filed for divorce in March 1992. Her divorce petition included allegations of bizarre and controlling demands from Robert. The marriage was clearly in deep trouble. The divorce proceedings quickly devolved into a contentious battle. The primary focus became the custody of their 3 young children. Investigators and prosecutors later determined the motive for the murder. It stemmed directly from this unresolved divorce and the bitter custody dispute. Multiple witnesses testified to hearing Fratta express his intentions. He repeatedly stated his desire to kill his wife. This was driven by his embitterment, the custody issues, and the prospect of significant child support payments. Fratta was not merely expressing anger, he was planning. Witnesses heard him discuss various methods, including shooting or staging a carjacking. He specifically mentioned wanting to find a hitman, particularly an African-American individual. Evidence later presented in court indicated Fratta orchestrated the entire murder plot. He did not intend to carry out the killing himself. He enlisted the help of a middleman. This was Joseph Pristash, a friend he knew from the gym. Fratta tasked Pristash with finding someone to commit the murder. Pristash then recruited the hired gunman. This was Howard Guidry, who was Pristash's neighbor. Guidry was brought in to carry out the actual killing. Fratta offered payment for the crime. He promised $1,000 to Guidry for pulling the trigger. Pristash was offered $2,000 and a Jeep Cherokee for his role as the go-between and getaway driver. The murder event took place on November 9, 1994. Farah Fratta was shot and killed in the garage of her home in the Houston suburb of Atascocita. Details emerged about the shooting itself. Guidry reportedly fired 2 shots at Farah. Both shots struck her in the head, resulting in her immediate death. The accomplice played a crucial role. Joseph Pristash was waiting nearby. He drove the getaway car, facilitating Guidry's escape from the scene. Neighbors provided crucial witness accounts. Several people in the vicinity saw a man, later identified as Guidry, fleeing the scene immediately after the shots were fired. Law enforcement responded quickly to the scene. Farah Fratta was found dead in her garage. The early investigation initially questioned Robert Fratta. However, he was released at that time due to a lack of direct evidence linking him to the shooting. A significant break in the case occurred months later. In March 1995, Howard Guidry was arrested for an unrelated bank robbery. During the bank robbery investigation, a key piece of evidence was recovered. A .38 caliber revolver was found in Guidry's possession at the time of his arrest. Police were able to trace the ownership of this weapon. The revolver was traced back to Robert Fratta. Records showed he had purchased it in 1982. Ballistics tests were conducted on the recovered revolver. These tests conclusively linked the firearm to the bullet fragments found at the murder scene in Farah Fratta's garage. This was a critical piece of forensic evidence. Beyond the physical evidence, witness testimony was compelling. Multiple individuals came forward and testified to hearing Robert Fratta make repeated statements about wanting his wife dead in the months leading up to the murder. These statements established his clear motive and intent. Further solidifying the case were the accomplice confessions. Both Joseph Pristash and Howard Guidry eventually confessed to their roles in the murder plot. Crucially, they both implicated Robert Fratta as the mastermind who hired them to kill his wife. Joseph Pristash's girlfriend, Mary Gipp, also played a role. She informed police of Guidry's involvement in the murder. Gipp later testified against Pristash, providing further details about the plot. Following the break in the case and the subsequent confessions, arrests were made. Robert Fratta, Joseph Pristash, and Howard Guidry were all taken into custody. All three men were charged with capital murder. In Texas, capital murder is a crime punishable by death or life imprisonment without parole. Due to the nature of the charges and potential conflicts, each man was tried separately. Their cases proceeded through the court system independently. Robert Fratta's first trial took place in 1996. He was found guilty of solicitation of capital murder. The jury sentenced him to death. Joseph Pristash also went to trial in 1996. He was found guilty of capital murder for his role as the middleman and getaway driver. He, too, was sentenced to death. Howard Guidry's first trial occurred in 1997. As the hired gunman, he was found guilty of capital murder. Like Fratta and Pristash, he received a death sentence. Throughout all legal proceedings, Robert Fratta maintained his innocence. He consistently denied any involvement in planning or orchestrating his wife's murder. Following their initial convictions and death sentences, all three men pursued appeals. Their cases went through the state and federal court systems. Initial appeals by Fratta, Pristash, and Guidry were largely unsuccessful. State and federal courts dismissed many of their early challenges between 1999 and 2000. However, Howard Guidry was granted a retrial. This occurred in 2007. The retrial was granted due to findings of prosecution misuse of evidence in his first trial. Despite the error, Guidry was convicted again of capital murder and sentenced to death once more. Robert Fratta was also granted a retrial. His second trial took place in 2009. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted the retrial, citing reliance on accomplice confessions and questionable procedures in his initial trial. In this second trial, Fratta was again convicted of solicitation of capital murder and received the death penalty for the second time. A poignant development in Fratta's retrial involved his children. Now older, his three children testified against him. Their testimony detailed the difficult family situation and their father's behavior. Following his second conviction, Fratta pursued further appeals against his sentence. These final attempts to overturn his death sentence were ultimately unsuccessful in state and federal courts. In the days leading up to his scheduled execution, Fratta's legal team attempted one final challenge. They sought to halt the execution based on the state's alleged use of expired lethal injection drugs. These last-minute efforts in the courts also failed. Robert Fratta's execution was carried out as scheduled. He was put to death by lethal injection on January 10, 2023, at the state penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. As of the time of Fratta's execution, his accomplices remain on death row. Joseph Pristash and Howard Guidry continue to pursue their own appeals in the Texas legal system. The Robert Fratta case holds significance in discussions of capital punishment and domestic violence. It highlights the extreme and tragic measures taken by Fratta in the context of his bitter divorce and custody dispute. The case serves as a stark example of how personal conflicts can escalate to horrific violence orchestrated for financial and custodial gain.